Do you have a whole collection of excuses that you use to justify your overeating? If the answer is yes, welcome to the club. Today we're going to look at those excuses and talk about how to let them go. Hello, my friend. You are listening to Weight Loss Made Real, and this is episode 262. I'm your host, Master Weight Loss Coach and author Cookie Rosenblum. Today and every Tuesday, I am your coach and your guide to help you end your emotional eating and lose your extra weight. If you just found me, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. Let's work together to end that emotional eating and that habitual overeating starting right now. This is weight loss for you, the thinking woman who's smart enough to know what doesn't work and is willing to dig a little deeper to make lasting change. This is where coaching meets psychology and psychology meets brain science. This is where your problem ends and freedom begins. There are 3 ways to connect with me. The first is with these podcasts created by me for you, where I help you understand why you do what you do, and I share some new ideas for you to think about and take action on. Then there's my free Facebook group called Weight Loss Made Real, just like this podcast. Join me there, where we talk about these podcasts and coaching sessions each week. And finally, when you're ready for permanent solutions to your struggles with weight and emotional eating, I hope you join me in my monthly membership, the Freedom Group. I created it for you, the smart woman who wants to stop overeating and start living your life. You can learn more about the Freedom Group in the show notes. All right, let's get started with your coaching session today. Here's what we're working on. As you know, this whole month of February is a month where we talk about the subject of how to eat. And next month's subject is how to think. This month in the Freedom Group, we're actually having our first internal challenge, and that is to not eat without hunger for 28 days. So what are we working on right here? Well, here we go. You know how you should be eating, right? You should be waiting for hunger. You should be choosing mostly foods that love you back. You should be staying connected while you eat so that you could hear the signal to stop at enough. These are the basics, right? But even if you know the basics, I'm guessing that sometimes you're still overeating. Maybe sometimes, maybe often. And you probably have a whole collection of excuses that you use over and over again to justify why you should overeat. In the moment, these excuses tell you it's okay. Keep eating. In the moment, the decision to eat without hunger, I know it seems to make sense. Am I accurate in describing what you do? You know you should wait for hunger to eat. So why might you not wait for hunger? In the moment, you're experiencing an urge to eat, even though you're not hungry. It's a mental urge from your mind, not from your body. But it feels like these urges are commands and that you have no choice. Remember, you do. You always have a choice. But let's look at some of the reasons why you might be convinced that you don't have a choice, why you might be doing this. And then we're going to look at some of the most common excuses to see if you're using any of these. So what exactly is an excuse? An excuse is a reason that you give, in this case, to yourself, in order to explain why you've done something or why you haven't done something, or you might use an excuse in order to avoid doing something. You make up an excuse to feel better about what you're doing or about why you're not doing what you said you would do, why you're not keeping your promises to yourself. You might use excuses with other people, but what I'm most concerned about today are the excuses that you make to yourself. about your eating. And remember, one of the biggest promises you're making is one that will lead you to become a natural eater, that you will eat when you're hungry and stop when the hunger is gone. That's the biggest promise. And you do that until the next time you're hungry. When we look at these common excuses today, we're going to talk about how to recognize them first and then blast through them. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to stop acting on them, how to stop believing your own excuses, also known as lying to yourself. So here are 5 of the most common excuses I have heard you all tell yourselves that definitely seem logical in the moment. These come from many years of working with private clients and also from years with members in the Freedom Group. So I'm going to explain what they are, why you say them, and what to do about them. So here's number 1. I'm going to put 3 little ones together because they're all related, and often you might say them together. Here they go. Well, this isn't a big deal. There's only a little bit left, and what's the difference? These are usually the words you say when you want to eat and you aren't hungry. It might be that little bit left after a meal or a snack. It might be something someone offers you. Can you see that these excuses are not true? That it does make a difference if you eat when you're not hungry? Everything you eat counts. Everything you put in your mouth adds up and takes you closer to what you want or further away from what you want. But in the moment of saying that or thinking that, that excuse relieves you of your accountability. You think eating that food really is not a big deal. You really believe it. You want to believe it. And so you think it and you feel like your journey is worthless, like it won't amount to anything. It's not important enough for you to be truthful to yourself. This excuse makes you feel defeated ahead of time. What's the point of trying to reach your goal? And so, of course, you give in to the urge to finish that food, whatever it is, however little it is, when you're not hungry. And you perpetuate the lie to yourself. No one else can hear you. No one else knows what you're doing. It's like a very private lie. But your result is that your weight stays the same and you have a stronger habit. So that's excuses number 1. This isn't a big deal. There's only a little bit left, and what's the difference? All right, here's excuse number 2. Tell me if this is you. Oh, I'll just start tomorrow. You've said those words, right? I certainly have. The excuse this time is one of postponement. Now, it doesn't feel as bad as you saying or thinking, I just give up, I'm quitting. You give yourself the hope of continuing and getting somewhere, but just not right now. So you're delaying your goal. You're delaying your commitment to your goal. You're delaying your outcome. You're prolonging the pain and the discomfort you have now of not changing your eating habits. And you're delaying the pain of doing the new thing because remember, there's always pain in doing the new thing until the new thing becomes comfortable, until it becomes the regular thing. When you use this excuse, you're dealing with the present you instead of the future you. When you tell yourself you're going to start tomorrow, you're letting the present you off the hook. But you're disappointing the future you by postponing what it will take now to create a different version of you in the future. And every time you postpone what you need to do today until sometime in the future, because tomorrow becomes tomorrow and tomorrow becomes tomorrow, you push what you really want further and further out. What are the results you get with this excuse? You stay the same. And in the moment, you do feel some relief because you don't have to change and you don't have to do the new thing and you get to stay comfortable. But remember, relief now feels like disappointment and frustration in the future. So excuse number 2 is when you say to yourself, I'll start tomorrow. All right, ready for excuse number 3? Who cares? Or, I just don't care. Wow, I know how true this excuse feels in that moment. But you know you wouldn't be here listening to me if you truly didn't care. You wouldn't be searching the internet for an answer to your struggle. You'd be eating with abandon all the time and not pursuing freedom from the whole eating and weight struggle. And yet, here you are, because you do care. You do want to find a way out. You do want to achieve freedom. It's a matter of the big picture life decisions fighting against those small, immediate decisions. In the big picture of your life, you do care. Of course you do. You want to learn how to be a natural eater. You want to stop maintaining your extra weight or gaining even more weight. And you want to stop the whole eating and weight struggle. I know. You want to stop regretting what and how much you're eating. But in the moment, you don't see that. All you see is the fight between you and the food in that moment. Between you saying yes to what you really want, big picture, and you saying no to the immediate pleasure of something that tastes good. Now, don't underestimate the pull of food. Food that tastes good. We are all wired to seek pleasure, and food is pleasure. So don't be surprised that your brain is going to see that food as something important, something it does not want to lose. It doesn't want to give up. It doesn't want you to say no thank you. You will always want the pleasure, but you can train your brain to want the genuine happiness of that bigger picture win more. And yes, this takes practice, of course, but it's so worth it. So when you hear yourself saying something like, I just don't care, I want you to have a little alarm in your head go off so that you recognize those words and you know in your heart that you're saying or thinking something that isn't true. I know those words feel true in the moment, but when you step back and insert a pause in the scenario, these words are not true. You do care. You do want a different outcome. You do want to stop overeating. It's only the momentary, temporary habit of giving into that who cares thought. And you don't want to do that anymore. So I want you to rise up and be the adult here in your life. And when you hear yourself say, I don't care, I want you to jump in with the truth. Look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror, and remind yourself that you do care. Correct that thought and stop honoring it. So that was excuse number 3. Who cares? Or I just don't care. Let's move on to excuse number 4. I've had a rough day, or I'm having a rough life, or life is so hard, and I deserve something. All right, here's an excuse that you might use often in response to all kinds of events in your life and all kinds of emotions that you feel. You might be feeling worry and doubt and confusion or frustration and fear and sadness. Whatever you're feeling, you're letting your lower brain tell you that you can't handle that feeling and that extra food is the solution. Your lower brain is saying, look, just a few bites of those chips or maybe the whole bag, that will solve your problem. That will make your life better. Here's the answer, says your very cunning brain, right? Of course you have to eat it, right? How compelling is this? And we know the answer is very, because we all strive to feel as good as we can, even though we know life is not a 100% happy ride. But in the moment, we always want to go for the happiness, and we think that the food is the answer. Now, part of the reason we think this is because we're wired to avoid pain, just like we're wired to seek pleasure. So if you're feeling a negative emotion and you're in the habit of responding to a negative feeling with food, this excuse, it's going to feel so reasonable to you. But I want you to pause and remember, step back, look at the bigger screen, the bigger picture of your life. Life can be challenging, absolutely. Food will not change that, and food will not save you from all those feelings. I know you think it will make you feel better, but the truth is, it will only work for the few moments when you're actually eating. Because while you're eating, you'll be distracted from whatever's going on. But as soon as you finish eating, all the feelings, the worry and doubt and confusion and frustration and fear and sadness, all of them will come rushing back. The food pushes them aside while you eat, but it doesn't take them away. So I know that this excuse to eat without hunger is just an excuse, and I want you to know that. Words that could make you feel better about what you're doing, but you don't want to do that anymore. Life can be crazy. Life can be hard. You might be unhappy in this moment, but food without hunger, it is not the answer. So that was excuse number 4. Life is hard. My day was hard. I deserve something. Now, let's look at one last excuse that I'll bet you've used at some point. I know when my kids were babies and I was beyond exhausted, this kind of thought came into my mind all the time. This is my only pleasure. I need something. So you might think, I can't get through this without some fun, without some pleasure. And food is so easy. Right? It's right there. It tastes so good. I'm just going to have a little. And then you might bring in some of your other favorite excuses, because excuses like to hang out together, like, oh, I'll just start tomorrow. I just need something right now. And who cares? We're going to lump them all together, right? You might be feeling desperate in the moment, desperate to have something just for you, something yummy, something that will be pleasurable, and you have a strong, strong want for it. Again, remember how your brain is created to seek pleasure. Now, you do need pleasure. You do deserve pleasure. And yes, food is pleasure. Food that your body's ready for, that you're hungry for, that is pleasure. Food in the right amount at the right time, that is pleasure. Food that your body doesn't need at that moment, food that you're not yet hungry for, is not true pleasure. Eating proactively for the hunger to come is not true pleasure. You're adding something unneeded to your body to fill a need that just doesn't line up. The solution doesn't fit the problem. You know this. I know you do. In that moment, you just can't see it. The desire for pleasure is clouding your judgment, and you can't see the truth in that moment. So I want you to step back when you say to yourself, I need this pleasure right now, and see these words for the excuses that they are, as just a momentary Band-Aid that you are seeking to feel good, and it will not work. So we talked about the most common excuses. Now here's your next step. Here's what I want you to think about and do this coming week. I want you to recognize at least one of the excuses we talked about that you use to overeat. I want you to know the words that you always use. And that means I want you to write it down. It will take 1 minute. See that this is just a habit loop. It doesn't have any real meaning. It's just a habit that you're used to responding to, and you don't have to. But you need to know the words that you use. You need to know those thoughts so that you can begin to recognize them in the moment right before you eat food that your body doesn't need, and you can catch them. That is the step out of your excuse. Give yourself a big pat on the back then for catching yourself before you go into that excuse, into that habit. It's going to take several tries to hear your thoughts. And then it's going to take several more tries to hear the thought and follow through and not eat. That's okay. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It matters that you're doing it. And seeing what you're doing is the first step. So remember, just like eating food that your body's not ready for, it all counts. The work you do, however tiny your steps are, it all counts and it all adds up. Okay, my friend, you know what you're going to stay focused on and the action step that you'll want to take this week. Remember, if you'd like help from me to make lasting changes in how you're eating so that you actually become one of those people who are natural eaters, the place to do that is the Freedom Group. The Freedom Group opens for new members a few times a year, so grab your spot on the wait list to be the first to know when we are ready for you. You could find a link to the wait list in the show notes or go to weightlossmadreal.com/group. I hope to see you back here next week where we will continue to work on all the reasons that you're overeating so that you can lose weight until your old habits fade away. We both know that is your ultimate goal. So for now, this is your Coach Cookie reminding you that as you search for answers, keep it real, just like you. And I will see you next week.